I have been making applique patterns for years, and I think the biggest thing that holds people back from learning is not knowing what to put the applique on. I think a full-size quilt sounds way too intimidating, which I totally understand. That's why I love this as an option. It's basically a mini quilt, but I just call it like an applique backing, quilted wall hanging backing. And I want to show you two different methods on how to put one together today. Really quickly, I did just want to address when you're going to want to attach the applique to the front. So it's kind of personal preference. Usually with smaller pieces like this, if I happen to make the backing first, I will just apply it after. I don't find it to be that big of a deal, and all of my kits actually work that way too. It also depends if you're doing a larger piece, like say a coat, and you want the quilting that is done on here to be underneath the applique, then you would attach it after. But you can also attach the applique to this front piece first and then make the quilt sandwich that I'm going to show you how to do in this video. So ultimately it's up to you. There really is no right or wrong. It's just if you want to be going through all three layers or worry about not going through that back layer, or just have something a little lighter, easier to fold to carry around. So yeah, totally up to you. Let's get started. Our first technique uses the backing as our binding. You're going to need a threaded sewing machine, an iron, backing fabric, quilt batting, and a front piece, a ruler, safety pins, quilt clips, fabric scissors, sewing pins, and a fabric marking pen. Start by cutting out the fabric in your size of choice, and then cut the front piece and the quilt batting 1 inch smaller on all sides. So you'll see there the backing is 1 inch larger, and then you're gonna baste it with safety pins. You can also use a basting spray or a basting stitch, that's totally up to you. You're just gonna wanna make sure all layers are super flat, and this will temporarily hold them together. Now we're going to fold our excess backing over to create the binding. You'll fold it once towards that front end batting piece and iron down. Then you're going to fold it over again, so about 1/2 inch is going to be covering on the front piece. Pin it in place with quilt clips, and if you don't have quilt clips, pins will do just fine as well. I just personally prefer quilt clips. Repeat this on all sides, and then I'll show you how to do the corners. For the corners, you're going to take one side of the binding and fold it over towards the other, creating this little triangle that you see above. Then you'll fold the other part down and fold it one more time to create the mitered corner and clip it in place. Repeat this for all corners, and then you'll take it to the sewing machine. Now you're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge on the inside of the binding. This will hold everything in place, and as long as you measured everything correctly when you were folding it over, then the spacing on the back should be correct as well. And that's all. This method's pretty straightforward and simple, and honestly one of my favorite to use for squares and rectangles. Now we'll move on to method 2, binding with bias tape or quilt binding. Mostly the same supplies. You're going to need threaded sewing machine, iron, backing fabric, batting, and a front piece, a ruler, safety pins, quilt clips, fabric scissors, sewing pins, a fabric marking pen, and bias tape or quilt binding. Start by cutting out 3 identical pieces in your backing, quilt batting, and front fabric. Make your quilt sandwich by laying your backing fabric wrong side up, then your quilt batting, then your front fabric, wrong side facing down. Get things smooth and baste if necessary. Now you'll determine if you need bias tape or quilt binding. You can see here, quilt binding does not have the same stretch that bias tape, like you can see here, does. So if you have any curves, you're going to want to use bias tape. Since I have an oval, I'm using bias tape, and I'm going to pin it with the outer edge up against the outside of my quilt sandwich. Once it's pinned all the way around, we're ready to take it to the sewing machine. You will sew about 3/8 inch away from the edge all the way around. Now you'll take all the pins out, and then we're going to iron the bias tape away from the center towards the outside edge, getting ready to fold it over to the back. Now when you fold it over, rather than going by the iron markings that may be there already, I like to fold it and line up the edge just barely past the stitch line that you already made on the front. That way, when you go to sew it in place, you should be catching that bias tape all the way around. Once you've pinned it all the way around, we're going to take it to the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew along the inside of that bias tape towards the inside of the wall hanging, and you're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. As long as you lined up the other side with the stitching that was there, then you should be catching both sides. I recommend not tugging too much on the clips because that can move your bias binding away from that place, and then you'll miss it on the other side. And just like that, you're done with your wall hanging.